Welcome to this episode of the Harpreet Singh Show. I'm your host Harpreet Singh from Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. In today's program, I'm going to take you over to Kuala Lumpur, where my guest is Harbhajan Singh, a well-known journalist who is the owner and publisher of Asia Samachar. This is a newspaper which connects people of Indian origin in Southeast Asia. So let's get over to him and learn from him about this area, the challenges, the achievements of the people of Indian origin over there, and how Asia Samachar is playing an important role in connecting the dots. So आओ चलते हैं जी कोला लंपुर ते गलबात दा सिलसिला शुरू करते हैं. सरदार हरभजन सिंह जी, Jianu, welcome to the program. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having us on the program.
It's a pleasure having you. Thank you very much. So Harbhajan Singh ji, you have been a journalist all through your life. In '87, you were the first Punjabi in a Malaysian newspaper. And then in 2014, you started Asian Samachar, which is now a major newspaper which connects the people of Indian origin and especially the Sikhs in Southeast Asia. So your interest towards journalism, how did this develop?
I've always been intrigued by reporting journalism from very young days. My young days, I remember we used to be in the younger days. I was active at our local Gurdwara, and I actually ran a newsletter for the Gurdwara. We would take stuff from everywhere, put them together, and then add our local news and distribute it around. So that has always been my passion and my calling, I would think. And I eventually became a journalist when the opportunity came. Just a bit of a correction, I'm not the first Punjabi in Malaysian newspaper. There have been other Punjabis. I'm probably the first Punjabi in a Malay newspaper, the Malay newspaper that I joined, Berita Harian.
Okay. Wonderful. So your interest in journalism started, you got intrigued, and then of course you now run this newspaper, which we'll talk a little later about. But before that, if you could just give us, our viewers who are watching this program all over the world, a little bit information about the people of Indian origin and especially the Sikhs in Southeast Asia. किन्नी कुछ साड़ी आबादी हैगी उत्थे की काम ज़्यादातर लोग करते हैगे ने?
Right. In Southeast Asia, basically, you're talking about countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, surrounded by Vietnam and some of the other countries. The Sikh population, the Punjabi population in this region came towards the later part of 19th century and early 20th century. That's when the migration happened. And many of them were connected with the British when they moved here. Right now, we don't have definite numbers for Sikhs per se, but I would estimate in this region in the range of say 200,000 for the whole of Southeast Asia. That would be only Kasadia Badia, 2 lakh in this region. Hanji. The majority of them would be in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Indonesia. That in that order, I would think.
And mostly these people are immigrants, or they have been living over here for ages. When did immigration start over here? What were the kind of challenges that people faced, and now where does the community stand?
Probably we would, most of us are now the 4th, the 5th, or maybe even the 6th generation here. Migration would have started towards the mid 1800s. So if you look at Singapore, the records that we have says that the first Sikh who came there was a gentleman by the name of Pai Maharaj Singh, and that's in some mid 1800s. So that would be let me just check that, when he was the first Sikh who would have come there, 1849. That's the records that we have. He was actually a political prisoner. He was sent by the British, sent over here, to be forgotten. Eventually after that, more came, primarily to work as soldiers, as policemen, and in the security area. And when those guys came here, the word went back. Word went back. You can find a living here. You can find work here, and it's a decent paying jobs that you can get here. So more Punjabis than from both sides, our combined Punjab, more of them started coming. Mostly male. Females came in much later. initial wave were males, and the migration towards Southeast Asia happened way before Sikhs started moving to places like US, Canada, Britain, and others. So this was one of the first parts when Sikhs started moving. And ਮੈਨੂੰ ਯਾਦ ਆ ਮੇਰਾ ਦਾਦਾ ਜੀ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ those days when Sikhs from Punjab when they were coming to Malaya or Singapore, they used to refer this place as Chin. Chin meaning China.
Okay.
I would think that could be because at that time there were also people who were going towards Hong Kong and China. So I suppose it's the same route. So many a time वो कहते होंगे भाई तो चीन नु जाना, but actually they are referring to coming to Malaya or to Singapore. So that is the basic pattern of how they started here.
Right. And now the people who are living over here, they are well settled, mostly in jobs or businesses. What are they doing?
Okay, well settled, like I said, 4th generation, 5th generation, 6th generation. A lot of professionals we have in Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. You have people who are doctors, engineers, people who are doing businesses. In Thailand, a lot of them run their own businesses. There are more Sikhs who are into business there, I think, per capita than maybe probably in Malaysia and Singapore as well. We have prominent people in the government as well, both in Malaysia and Singapore. We've had people who have reached high ranks in government, like in Malaysia. We had a Sikh gentleman who retired some years ago. He was a Secretary General of a ministry. So we have the federal government, and the federal government has various ministries led by ministers, of course. And at the civil side, the head of the top person, the top civil servant in the ministry is called the KSU, what do you call here, Ketua Setiausaha in the local language here, the chief secretary. So one of them was a Sardar. He retired some years ago. So even in the government, we have had many Sikhs who have reached the top levels. The
Wonderful.
same goes with politics as well. We have a lot of Sikhs who have got into politics as well.
Oh, that's interesting. So basically, education has been a major key for the success of the community over there, and people have really looked into this aspect. And of course, this must be followed through in the children also.
Very much so. ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਸੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਏ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਧਿਆਨ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਐਜੂਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ
Right.
ਇਹ ਪੱਖੋਂ they really stressed and they worked their butts out to raise their children, to give education to their children. They may not have been educated. My dad was not educated. My grandfather was barely educated. So on my maternal side. But they left no stone unturned to make sure that the children, their siblings get education. And they would work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, running one crossing the other, just to put, not just to put food on the table, but to make sure that they have enough spare to bring education.
Excellent. Excellent.
So that much I must say, they were really,
Well,
that was their focus.
the community needs to be congratulated for focusing on this particular aspect, because in the Western world, and especially in some of the areas in Canada, this aspect has not been given much consideration. But as you have pointed out, in Southeast Asia, this was a major focus of our elders, and that is the reason that today we are finding our children in virtually all walks of life who are succeeding over there. Harbhajan Singh ji, it's time for a short break. Let's go for a break. We'll be shortly back, and we'll continue with the discussion as to how are you accepted now? What were the challenges when our ancestors came over here, and is some kind of racism evident over here, or you are accepted over here and you are thriving with the other communities? So we'll talk all about
हर
this.
रंग है साडे को, हर मॉडल, हर एक दी अपनी वक्री पहचान। असीं एक परिवार हाँ, साडा कर्म है अगे वधाउणा, सफर नूं सौखा बनाउणा। बसंत मोटर्स, तुहाडे नाल, तुहाडे करके।
है जुल्म ढाने का अंदाज भी कितना हंसी, हमारी जान पर बनाई है जब जब उसने अंगड़ाई ली। कभी खामोश रहते हैं, कभी शोर होता है। मोहब्बत में शरारत का मजा कुछ और होता है। दिल को जज्बात का तोहफा खामोशियों को बात का तोहफा, खूबसूरती में जड़ी नजाकत अदाओं की चांद से मुखड़े को चांद सा तोहफा।
भारत ज्वेलर्स, सच्चे प्यार की चमक जैसा। हाई बिजनेस सेंटर सरी।
ਕੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਰੀ, ਡੈਲਟਾ, ਰਿਚਮੰਡ, ਐਬਸਫੋਰਡ ਜਾਂ ਵੈਂਕੂਵਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਵਾਂ ਘਰ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਬਾਰੇ ਸੋਚ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਰੈਨੋਵੇਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ? ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਇੱਕ ਤਜਰਬੇਕਾਰ ਬਿਲਡਰ, ਇੱਕ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟਿਵ ਇੰਟੀਰੀਅਰ ਡਿਜ਼ਾਈਨਰ ਦੀ ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਗਾਈਡ ਕਰ ਸਕਣ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸੁਪਨੇ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਉਸਾਰ ਸਕਣ। ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਜਾਂ ਸੰਦੀਪ 6048259295 ਉੱਤੇ।
Once again, welcome back to the program. Our guest today is Sardar Harbhajan Singh from Kuala Lumpur, who is the editor of Asia Samachar. The community has progressed a lot in Southeast Asia, and that is what Harbhajan Singh ji is telling us all about. So let's get back to him and learn more as to what all is happening in Southeast Asia and how we find out, which we'll discuss in details about how Asia Samachar is connecting the community over there. So Harbhajan Singh ji, थोड़ा जिहा गलबात करिए challenges, achievements, of course ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ education ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨ ਅੱਜ ਬੱਚੇ ਉੱਚ ਪਦਵੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, but still is there any kind of racism? Are you accepted over there or there are some challenges?
I'll come to the challenges and racism shortly. We were talking about achievements. I would like to share a little bit about some achievements in politics and some achievements in judiciary. I think these are quite, they stand out. In politics, in 1958, a gentleman by the name, a lawyer gentleman by the name of Karam Singh Varia, he was only 22 years old. He was elected as a member of parliament. He had a socialist bent in his thinking. He was a people's person fighting for the poor, the downtrodden, and the likes. And in that year itself, he actually ran for office and he won. He would be, I think, the first Sikh to become a lawmaker outside of India. And that's going back to 1958-59. He won 2 seats. And then when we talk about politicians in Malaysia, we had the late Harpreet Singh. He is the lion of Jelutung, they call him. He was a fierce, respected opposition politician and a lawyer, and a very good lawyer as well. So his name is on the lips of many Malaysians when they talk about a man of valor, integrity. Harpreet Singh's name comes to mind for many people. In fact, his son was also into politics, Gobind Singh, and his son, 2 of his sons and daughters are into politics. His son Gobind Singh became the first Sikh minister outside of
India,
in Asia, outside of India, in 2018, when the opposition coalition then won the elections. So that was a big thing, a big celebration among the Sikhs, that okay, you have a Sikh. Of course, he didn't win because he's a Sikh alone. He won because he's a politician and what he's done. But it was celebrated by the Sikh community as a success, as a win within their community. Across the causeway in Singapore, so far we've already have 2 Sikhs who have become members of parliament. There was Davinder Singh. He became a member of parliament in 1988. He was the first Sikh to become a member of parliament in Singapore. And he was later followed by Inderjit Singh. Inderjit was the member of parliament from 1996 to 2015. So that's on politics. In judiciary, we've also had some major successes. Singapore, we had Justice Chur Singh, another well-known name. Justice Saab passed away in 2009. He was elevated to the Singapore bench of the Supreme Court in 1963, a real major achievement for Sikhs in this region. Whereas over here in Malaysia, we had Sarwan Singh Gill, who became the Chief Justice of Malaya in 1974. That's one of the top positions amongst the judiciary in Malaysia. So these were some of the success stories, politics, judiciary. We've also had some good stories in terms of the army, in terms of the police as well, and many others. Now, these past success stories have given us, in Malaysia at least, have given us a lot of goodwill. In the past, when people look at the Sikhs and the Sardars, there's always this respect for them. But of course, over the years, I would think that that goodwill has is kharch gaya hona. It's been used up. So we need to continue. We need to build up our new pool of goodwill as we move forward, and probably that is coming from the work that's being done by the people at large. Back to your question about the challenges, I would think like every other community, we have our fair share of challenges. Primary challenge would be identity. I mean, we are a minority in this part of the world. When I was in school, I was the only Sikh Punjabi boy in my class, and that's the experience of many fellow Sikhs around when they go, because we are quite spread out. And so that's your normal, usual this one. So can you imagine एक पंजाबी दा मुंडा सिखा दा मुंडा क्लास से बैठा ते ओहदे कोल जूड़ा, and can you imagine the pressure that they feel?
Of course.
My daughters are old. I have a 9-year-old son, and he's in what we call here standard 3. And he comes back and he tells me, Papa, I want to cut my hair. Because he feels it. He looks around his class. He's the only, in fact, in his school, he's the only Sikh boy with juda in a school of 500 people. He's the one. So that's identity is a daily daily challenge that we Sikhs face in this part of the world. And
that's a very important point, Harbhajan Singh ji, that you have touched. But before that, you talked about the goodwill. What are the reasons that the Sikhs are losing their goodwill amongst the general population? Is it because of some reason, our own infighting, which is affecting that, or because we are losing our identity, or that we are not being able to uphold the principles what our gurus told us of integrity, honesty, and so what do you feel? Why are we losing that goodwill?
Okay. Infighting exists in every community. We are Sikhs, so we know about infighting among Sikhs. I always get people coming to me and says, "Apa Punjabi log, Punjabi log hedai karde rehande, ladde rehande." So I normally tell them, "Paisa, tusi kade Italian de lokan naal baithi kade?" Right. ਜਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਬ੍ਰਾਜ਼ੀਲ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਕਦੇ ਨਾ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ infighting is a human thing. It's everywhere. But the surprising thing is, I can tell you this much, when the others look at Sikhs from outside, they see us as very united. They actually tell us, wow, you Sikhs, you guys are so united. We know our internal rivalries, we know our internal battles, we know our internal Gurdwara politics or organizational politics or Maryada issues. We know that. But not the external guys. When they look at us as one cohesive entity. So I don't think infighting is our problem. Right. When you're talking about the external parties. I would think if the goodwill is being lost, it's more because now they may not have, the present generation may not appreciate what the Sikhs are and what the Sikhs have done. Right. I think that appreciation somehow was more evident in the past. Yeah. And it's also a question of, I suppose, population is growing. So when the population grows, it becomes all the more difficult for a minority to shine and to show their position and what they have contributed. Right. But having said that, I must also add this, that over the last many years, Sikhs in this part of the world have done activities that have captured the attention and the eye of the others. Right. For example, in 2000, some years ago, we had 2004, I believe, we had massive tsunami in Aceh, right, Indonesia. Sikhs in Malaysia, they had got together, and they sent groups for humanitarian relief work in Indonesia. And that seva, that activity, really caught the eye of the people. They saw the Sikhs at work. And similarly, langar jara chalande as we are seeing in other parts of the world, in UK, in Canada, in US, many parts. Over here as well, during the COVID, there were Sikh groups that went around to assist communities that were badly hit by the
Right.
COVID, and they had assisted them. So I think
Excellent.
that brought a lot of goodwill to the community.
Excellent. And because it's an Islamic nation, is there any issue as far as professing of religion is concerned? Is there any challenge in that?
Okay. By and large, Sikhs have had a good run in this country. We have our share of when you can say when you're dealing with the politics and with race and religion. But we still have, there are still openings that for us to explore, and I think Sikhs still have a good what would I say? There's still good the goodwill is still there for us to do things. You know, we are small enough that we are not a threat. So in that sense, Sikhs can do things if they want to do things. But back to your earlier question, of course, there would be when you talk about, say, education, a lot of the education opportunities are given to what we call the Bhumi Putra. Bhumi Wale, I mean the originals who are here. By default, they get more opportunities. So we have to work so much harder. To get a place in universities, in colleges, and many of us then end up having to foot the bill privately to send kids either to private universities or abroad. So that can be very costly, and not all families can afford that kind of outlay for education. So there are
some issues,
challenges, and there are some issues.
Okay. And before I go for a break, one more question as far as our youngsters are concerned. Where I live in Vancouver in Canada, there's a major issue of gang warfare. Our youngsters are going towards gangs and drugs. But along with that, also we are finding that it's not just in the Sikh youngsters, but every religion is talking about this issue that the youngsters are going away from religion. So are these issues prevalent in Southeast Asian countries, or you are still safe from all this?
We have our challenges. Alcohol abuse is a big issue. Drug addiction is prevalent, is there. We have issues with, but as far as gangs are concerned, I've read stories coming up from Canada where you have Sikhs running gangs, and so we don't really have that much of an issue here. We may have minor, small gangs here and there, but gang per se is not really a major thing. But what is coming and what is of concern to the Sikhs in this region would be education. While the past parents have always put a lot of attention to education, we are seeing dropouts, and it could maybe not alarming, but it is of concern to the community that a lot of our children are dropping out from school. So that is an issue both here and in Singapore as well.
Okay.
So that is something that I think the community is trying to pay attention to that.
Right. But what about Sikh values or Bani and Bana ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਦੂਰ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਤੋਂ, as you mentioned, your son, 9-year-old son, he finds himself alone and he comes and talks about cutting the hair. So is this trend to be seen amongst the youngsters now in the community?
Religion, Kushwan Singh, the author, once said that many years ago, he was telling us that, the time will come when there will be no Sikhs with turban. And I was actively involved in a Sikh organization that was doing these melons and Gurmat Prachars and stuff like this in the 90s. And when I was in the box, so to speak, and doing the groundwork, I used to have that fear, that, wow, will we still have Sikhs as Sikhs in 20 years' time? To my surprise, many years later, when I was sitting in the Gurdwara one day and I'm looking around and I was looking at the young people. Of course, there's a good number of majority cut their hair. That's I think prevalent everywhere. But when I was looking at our Sikh boys who were actually having the turban, I was surprised to see the rang barange turbans that they were wearing.
Right.
Things that people when I was their age, I probably would not dare to come out that in that color, in that light, you know. But these guys were celebrating their turbans, celebrating their faith, you know, with their bright, beautiful turbans. So challenges are there, but I don't think it's something that we want to give up on, you know. There's always hope.
So, of course, you know, this has been talked, like you said, 20 years back also, this was a discussion, and today also we are talking about it. But luckily, everywhere we find that these challenges, what you are talking, we are facing everywhere. And as a community, we need to start discussing these issues. So probably there is some kind of talk on this, and your newspaper must be playing a role in this. So let's go for a break. Harbhajan Singh ji will be back. And then in the last segment, I would like to focus on Asian Samachar. This portal, online portal that you have started, a newspaper which connects the Southeast Asian Indians and Sikhs. What achievements have you had, and how is it this small newspaper is reaching out to the public? And of course, it's the community support only, the advertisements through which newspapers run. So are there any challenges, or people are supporting, and what else is being done by Asian Samachar? We'll talk all about this after this short break.
ਘਰ ਇੱਕ ਐਸੀ ਥਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਹਰ ਕੋਈ ਆਪਣੀ ਨਿੱਜੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਸੁਨਹਿਰੀ ਪਲ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖਦਾ ਹੈ। ਉਹ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰਿਆ ਜੀਵਨ ਬਤੀਤ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਪੂਰੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਦ ਕਿਸੇ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਨੂੰ ਸਜੇ ਹੋਏ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਬਦਲਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ। ਨਵੇਂ ਘਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਰੇਮਿੰਗ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਫਿਨਿਸ਼ਿੰਗ ਤੱਕ, ਡ੍ਰੇਪਰੀ, ਪੇਂਟਿੰਗਸ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਡੈਕੋਰੇਸ਼ਨ, ਅਸੈਸਰੀਜ਼ ਤੱਕ, ਤੁਸੀਂ SK ਹੋਮ ਡਿਜ਼ਾਈਨਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸੁਪਨਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਹਕੀਕਤ 'ਚ ਬਦਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਕਰੋ ਸੰਦੀਪ ਕੌਰ 6048259295।
ਜੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸਮੈਨ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਪਿਆਰ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤਾਂ ਕੀ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ? ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਮੋਟਰਸ ਦੇ ਓਨਰ ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਸਮਝ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇੰਟੈਲੀਜੈਂਸ ਦਾ ਉਦਾਹਰਨ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਾਰ ਸੈਗਮੈਂਟ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਖ ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਮੋਟਰਸ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਸਰੀ ਦਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਟਰੱਕ ਸੈਂਟਰ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲੋੜ ਦੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਲੋੜੀਂਦੇ ਟਰੱਕਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਗਾਈਡੈਂਸ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸਪੇਸ, ਮੋਡੀਫਿਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਫਿਊਲ ਐਫੀਸ਼ੀਐਂਸੀ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਧਿਆਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸੁਖੀ ਬਾਟ ਟਰੱਕ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਟਰੱਕਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਟੌਰ।
ਵੈਨਕਾਸਾ ਟਾਈਲ ਅਤੇ ਸਟੋਨ ਸ਼ੋਰੂਮ ਇੱਕ ਐਸੀ ਥਾਂ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹੋਲਸੇਲ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਹਰ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਟਾਈਲਸ, ਸਟੋਨ, ਮਾਰਬਲ, ਬੈਕਸਪਲੈਸ਼, ਮੋਜ਼ੇਕ ਆਦਿ ਵਾਜਬ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਮਿਲ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਟਾਲੀਅਨ, ਸਪੈਨਿਸ਼, ਚਾਈਨੀਜ਼, ਪੋਰਸਲਨ ਜਾਂ ਸਿਰੈਮਿਕ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਜਾਂ ਮਾਰਬਲ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਆਰਡਰ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਕਲੀਅਰੈਂਸ ਤੇ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਮਾਲਕ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟ ਟਾਈਲਸ ਇੰਪੋਰਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ, ਜਿਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਕੁਆਲਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਸਮਾਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਦਾ ਸ਼ਿੰਗਾਰ ਬਣਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਕਰੋ 1304 84 ਐਵਨਿਊ ਸਰੀ। ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਹਿੰਦੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 604 330 7363 604 330 7363। ਹਰ ਇੱਕ NRI ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੀ ਇਹ ਚਾਹ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਆਵੇ, ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਮੱਥਾ ਉਹ ਟੇਕਦਾ ਹੀ ਹੈ। ਐਂਡ ਆਫ ਕੋਰਸ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਜੇ ਆਈਏ ਤੇ ਸ਼ਾਪਿੰਗ ਨਾ ਕਰੀਏ, ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਆਫ ਕੋਰਸ ਸੰਭਵ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ। ਪਰ ਹੁਣ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਹੀ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਖੁਸ਼ਖਬਰੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਾਲ ਰੋਡ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਸਟੋਰ, ਜਿਸ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੈ ਅਨਿਲ ਸਟੋਰ, ਉਹ ਖੁੱਲ ਚੁੱਕਿਆ ਹੈ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਿ ਲੇਡੀਜ਼, ਜੈਂਟਸ ਅਤੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਟਿਚਡ ਅਤੇ ਅਨਸਟਿਚ ਕੱਪੜੇ ਖਰੀਦ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਆਪ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਆਓ ਤਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਸ਼ਾਪਿੰਗ ਕਰੋ ਅਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਮਿਲ ਸਕਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਹੇਠ ਲਿਖੇ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਅਤੇ ਫੋਨ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫੋਨ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਜੇਕਰ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਆ ਰਹੇ, ਈਵਨ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫੋਨ ਕਰੋ ਅਤੇ ਇਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਆਨਲਾਈਨ ਸ਼ਾਪਿੰਗ ਵੀ ਕਰਵਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ।
ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਸੁਖੀਬਾਟ ਮੋਟਰਸ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਇਆ ਕਸਟਮਰ ਅਪਰੀਸੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਗਿਵ ਅਵੇ ਔਨ 6th of August ਸੈਟਰਡੇ, ਜਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ $3100 ਦੇ ਸ਼ਾਨਦਾਰ ਇਨਾਮ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿੱਤ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਜੀ ਸਹੀ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ, $3100। ਬਸ ਉਹਦੇ ਲਈ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਖੁਦ ਨੂੰ ਐਂਟਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਆਈਦਰ ਐਜ਼ ਇਨ ਪਰਸਨ ਔਰ ਆਨਲਾਈਨ at sukhibaatautogroup.com ਤੇ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਸੁਖੀਬਾਟ ਮੋਟਰਸ ਦੇ ਸ਼ੋਰੂਮ ਤੇ। For more details kindly contact।
ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫਿਰ ਆਪ ਸਭ ਦਾ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਹਰਭਜਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਨਾਲ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਨੇ ਕੁਆਲਾਲੰਪੁਰ ਤੋਂ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਸਮਾਚਾਰ ਨਿਊਜ਼ਪੇਪਰ ਚਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ। ਇਹ ਉਹ ਅਖਬਾਰ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਊਥ ਈਸਟ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਅਚੀਵਮੈਂਟਸ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਔਰਿਜਨ ਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ, ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰਮੋਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਅੱਜ ਉਸੇ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਸਮਾਚਾਰ ਜੋ ਇਹ ਅਖਬਾਰ ਹੈ 2014 ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਮੇਜਰ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਜੁਆਇੰਟ ਬਣ ਚੁੱਕਿਆ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਲਈ ਲੋਕ ਉਡੀਕਦੇ ਨੇ ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਕਾਮਯਾਬੀਆਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੁਝ ਨਾ ਕੁਝ ਅਚੀਵ ਕੀਤਾ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਆਰਮੀ ਹੋਏ ਜਾਂ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਹੋਏ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਉਭਾਰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਸਪੋਰਟਸ ਹੋਵੇ। ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਜੋ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਉਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਕਸਦ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਸਕਸੀਡ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਉਸ ਲਈ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਸਮਾਚਾਰ ਇੱਕ ਐਸਾ ਪੋਰਟਲ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ ਜੋੜਦਾ ਹੈ। ਹਰਭਜਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਥ ਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਆਓ ਮੁੜ ਤੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਦਾ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਹਰਭਜਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, ਜੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਤਸਵੀਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਲੋਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਾਮਯਾਬ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਾਈਲਾਈਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਹੋ, ਅਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਮੇਜਰ ਹੱਬ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਜੋੜਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕ ਨੇ ਸਾਊਥ ਈਸਟ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਓਰੀਜਨ ਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ। ਸੋ 2014 ਤੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, 8 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਨੇ, ਐਂਡ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਟਲੀ ਯੂ ਆਰ ਗਰੋਇੰਗ ਇਨ ਅ ਬਿਗ ਵੇ, ਬਟ ਸਟਿਲ ਹਾਊ ਡੂ ਯੂ ਰੀਚ ਆਊਟ ਟੂ ਦ ਪਬਲਿਕ? ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਇੰਨੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ? ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਲਟੀਮੇਟਲੀ ਐਜ਼ ਐਥਨਿਕ ਨਿਊਜ਼ਪੇਪਰਸ ਰਿਸੋਰਸਿਸ ਘੱਟ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਚੈਲੰਜਸ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਬਟ ਹਾਊ ਆਰ ਯੂ ਸਰਮਾਊਂਟਿੰਗ ਆਲ ਥੀਸ?
Well, this Asia Samachar came about simply because we wanted to celebrate our success stories in this region. Being a small minority, I mean, Sikhs do appear in the media, the mainstream media, from time to time, but you can imagine that it won't be that much. The issues that are not so of interest to the mainstream media will get neglected, and they will not get mentioned. And so are the success stories. So we decided, I've been in the media line my whole life. This is my life basically, and a few others. A few of us got together and said, hey, why don't we launch our own platform so that we can share the success stories for the community? And that's what Asia Samachar is basically all about, is to highlight our wins and also our challenges and our issues. So we are run by a group of volunteers. We all hold full-time jobs. We come here and then we do whatever we can.
Wonderful.
In between our time and whenever we get free time, and being journalists and being among us, we have the network enough to gather information and then to get each other to help out to whip up a story or a few lines or something to share. And over the years, Asia Samachar has built its name and reputation. So what happens, as in any media that has built up its reputation, then the news will automatically flow to you as well. I mean, that's how media works. So now we get approached by the community when they see something. You know, koi uncle ne dekha his nephew is doing well and just got accepted for maybe the state hockey team, and then he would message us, hey, I have a nephew, 18-year-old who has just been adopted, I mean, who just got into the state team.
Right.
Why don't you highlight this? So the news comes to us as well.
Yeah,
so
that's what we saw, you know, in your paper, the highlights, the pictures I just showed, where we have the top people in all the fields who have been highlighted, their success stories have been brought forward.
Yes. So that basically is the intention there, and we're just keeping it going so that so we can continue sharing those success stories. That is actually the underlying purpose and existence for Asia Samachar. And
but
how
of
has
course,
it has benefited.
Yeah, you're talking it has benefited.
Yeah. It has benefited the community because the community now is informed about what's going on around them, what's happening to the people, and some of the issues. One area that we have also stepped in is announcements for death. So, I mean, being a small community, we are either related to each other, or we know each other, we have friends from each other. So in Malaysia, especially when a death announcement, when Asia Samachar carries a death announcement, it gets shared very quickly. And if you go to our Facebook or our Instagram, you will notice that that becomes like a third-party platform where people share their messages for condolences, grief. So you can really read that really hits home with people. So that is another area where we have really made a mark, I would say.
Right.
And also the other one would be that basically discussing issues that are affecting the community. We do try to initiate discussions, and but I think we can do a lot more on that front. I don't think we are doing enough on that front.
But Harbhajan Singh ji, are people from Southeast Asia only focused? The world is becoming a global village, and as it's an online newspaper now, are you planning to expand also and get more people involved in this?
We don't really have global plans. You see, what we were doing was our primary intention was to fill a vacuum. If I look at Canada, if I look at US, and if I look at even say Britain, I think otte sadi ginti kafi. The number of Sikhs, the Punjabi community is larger, and you have more enterprises, more businesses, and more things. Economically, you are stronger there. So those in those areas, you have newspapers and media channels like yours and many others that are serving that community. Likewise, in Australia, there's a state-backed radio station. It is funded by the state. So you have something there. In this part of the world, there was a vacuum. So we are basically just filling up that vacuum. Whether there's an opportunity to expand, that depends. I mean, if it makes sense, we can always look at it. But the idea was actually to fill a vacuum. And that's what we have always been doing.
But community support is required to run any organization, and though there are a lot of volunteers who come and support you, but of course it must be costing you whatever you are doing. So are there enough community support to, this can be sustained for long, or how does it go all about?
Well, for what we are running at the moment, it is self-funding. So we can raise a little bit of funds here and there and then some out-of-pocket costs. We can maintain it. But if we want to go to the next step, if we want to enlarge it, then we probably will have to look at some other funding. But at the moment, we've not really made those plans. So we are quite happy to serve the community the way we are.
Wonderful. That's excellent. And Harbhajan Singh ji, it was a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for informing us about the challenges, the achievements of the community over there, and how you are trying to bring the role models further through Asia Samachar so that others, and especially the youngsters, can be inspired. Thank you very much. And in conclusion, anything you want to say, and also your website where people can go and have a look at the newspaper.
The website is there. It's an open website. All the stories that we've done since 2014 are there for people to read. And if you have something that you think is of interest to us, yes, drop us a note. We're always happy to hear from our readers and from our friends. And if you are ever coming to this part of the world, do visit Southeast Asia. It's a beautiful place. A lot of lovely places to visit. Do come and do check and do connect with the local Sikh community as well. We can always help in whichever way we can.
Absolutely. And your website is asiasamachar.com?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. Harbhajan Singh ji, once again, thank you very much for your time, and best wishes from our side to you, and hope to see you soon, maybe in Kuala Lumpur or you in Canada. Thank you very much. ਸੋ ਇਹ ਸਨ ਸਾਡੇ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਮਹਿਮਾਨ ਸਰਦਾਰ ਹਰਭਜਨ ਸਿੰਘ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਸਮਾਚਾਰ ਦੇ ਐਡੀਟਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਸਾਊਥ ਈਸਟ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ, ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਿੰਗਾਪੁਰ, ਕੁਆਲਾਲੰਪੁਰ, ਮਲੇਸ਼ੀਆ ਦਾ ਕੈਪੀਟਲ ਹੈ ਕੁਆਲਾਲੰਪੁਰ, ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਹੋਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿੱਖ ਅਤੇ ਪੀਪਲ ਆਫ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਔਰੀਜਨ ਜੋ ਹਨ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਨੈਕਟ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਸਮਾਚਾਰ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਅਤੇ ਹਾਈਲਾਈਟ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਾਮਯਾਬ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। क्योंकि जिस तरह इस प्रोग्राम का भी मकसद मैं हमेशा कहना, पर्पस टू एजुकेट यू, इंस्पायर यू एंड टू एम्पावर यू, एंड आई फाइंड थ्रू दिस asiasamachar.com website they're doing the same thing for people in Southeast Asia, so that our youngsters get inspired and they follow the footsteps of those role models. And I think we need to encourage such kind of initiatives so that the community progresses and prospers wherever it is. Once again, thank you very much for sparing your valuable time and being a part of this program. ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਾਥ ਹੋਇਆ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ ਮੰਡੇ ਟੂ ਫਰਾਈਡੇ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਦੇ 6 ਵਜੇ ਪੈਸੀਫਿਕ ਸਟੈਂਡਰਡ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਬਣਨਾ ਚਾਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹੋ ਜਿਸ ਦੀ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਉਪਲਬਧੀ ਹੈ, ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ WhatsApp ਰਾਹੀਂ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ 6046037555, or you can email me at harpreetsingh@gmail.com. ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ, ਫਿਰ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। Have a safe evening, stay healthy and enjoy yourself.